Ooh, hello. Hello. Oh, I didn't get playing. This one, we're gonna do this one, and this one was gonna be like a mixed bag one. All right, yeah. Yo, yeah. Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun.
Donald Trump files defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, claiming massive economic damage to his brand value, ABC News. U.S. President Donald Trump has sued the New York Times, four of its reporters and publisher Penguin Random House for at least $15 billion United States dollars, $22 billion. Claiming defamation and libel and citing reputational damage, a Florida court filing shows. Mr. Trump's suit cites a series of New York Times articles including an editorial prior to the 2024 presidential election which said he was unfit for office. The lawsuit also includes a 2024 book published by Penguin titled, Lucky Loser, How Donald Trump Squandered His Father's Fortune and Created the Illusion of Success. Defendants maliciously published the book in the articles knowing that these publications were filled with repugnant distortions and fabrications about President Trump. The filing lodged to the U.S. District Court in Florida said. The New York Times and Penguin did not immediately respond to a request for comment outside regular business hours. In a post on his social media site Truth Social announcing the lawsuit, Mr. Trump accused the New York Times of becoming a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. The Times has engaged in a decades-long method of lying about your favorite president, me, my family, business, the America First movement, MAGA, and our nation as a whole, Mr. Trump said in the post. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for far too long, and that stops now. Mr. Trump's lawyers claimed the publications had harmed the U.S. president's business and personal reputation, causing massive economic damage to his brand value and significantly hurting his future financial prospects. The harm to the value of TMTG Trump Media and Technology Group stock is one example of how the defendants' defamation has injured President Trump, his lawyers said, citing a precipitous decline in the stock price. The lawsuit claimed these publications were part of a decades-long pattern by the New York Times of intentional and malicious defamation against President Trump. In his social media post, Mr. Trump also pointed to past lawsuits, including against U.S. network ABC News and its anchor George Stephanopoulos. They were ordered to pay $15 million United States dollars, $23 million towards Mr. Trump's presidential library to settle a lawsuit over an inaccurate on-air assertion the president had been found civilly liable for raping writer E. Jean Carroll. Mr. Trump also cited a lawsuit against CBS parent media group Paramount over a 60 Minutes interview with former presidential rival Kamala Harris, which he claimed was edited to tip the scales in favor of her Democratic Party. This ended in a $16 million United States dollars, $24 million settlement. ABC wires. Tesla settles lawsuits over two fatal crashes involving autopilot software, ABC News. 9h ago 9 hours AGOWED the 17th of September 2025 at 3:56 p.m. In short, Tesla has reached confidential deals to resolve 2 lawsuits over crash deaths involving the company's autopilot software. The lawsuits relate to separate crashes in California in 2019, including one that killed a 15-year-old boy. Tesla did not respond to requests for comments. Tesla has settled 2 lawsuits over 2019 California crash deaths involving the company's autopilot software, court documents show. The confidential deals come weeks after a Florida jury ordered Tesla pay $243 million United States dollars, $364 million in compensatory and punitive damages to the victims of another fatal 2019 crash of a Model S that was equipped with autopilot. Tesla hired a trio of prominent new lawyers and asked a judge to find the verdict legally and justified and throw out the case, or to order a new trial. The electric vehicle maker, which has settled several other cases involving its vehicles and self-driving technology, had rejected a $60 million United States dollars, almost $90 million settlement proposal for the Florida lawsuit, a filing showed last month. The Florida verdict and the 2 settlements in California are significant, as much of Tesla's $1.4 trillion United States dollars, $2.1 trillion valuation hangs on chief executive Elon Musk's promise to rapidly expand its robotaxis and the full self-driving FSD software that underpins them. FSD is an advanced version of autopilot. Lawsuits relate to 2 2019 crashes. One lawsuit relates to the death of a 15-year-old boy who was traveling in Alameda County, California, with his father in a vehicle when it was rear-ended by a Tesla Model 3, which had autopilot engaged, causing the victim's vehicle to roll over and crash into the center barrier. The boy succumbed to his injuries from the collision. The other case relates to the death in December 2019 of 2 people who were traveling through an intersection in Gardena, California, in a Honda Civic when a Tesla Model S, equipped with autopilot, failed to stop at a red light at high speed and crashed into the victim's vehicle. Tesla did not respond to requests for comments. Representatives for the plaintiffs, lawyers did not comment on the Alameda case and did not respond to a request for comment on the Gardena case. Trials for both the cases were scheduled to start next month, one in Alameda County Superior Court and the other in Los Angeles County Superior Court. A judge in the Alameda Superior Court vacated the scheduled trial on Tuesday, local time, while Tesla and the plaintiffs agreed to withdraw their petitions in the Los Angeles trial, according to the court orders. Reuters.
Gonna go to the news. How do we go to the news? To the
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
She was every student's favourite teacher.
She would joke around with us, more like a friend than a teacher.
And I remember her saying, "Into the cost of silence." Available now. Search Background Briefing on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. Is behind the wheel of other cars. great things about owning an EV right now is that you're not taxed for using the roads. Those behind the wheel of other cars pay the fuel excise when they refill. But the government is looking to change that. Today, Giles Parkinson, founder and editor of Renew Economy and the Driven websites, and an EV owner himself, on what he says is a half-assed idea. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal Land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Giles, a lot of us really dream of getting an EV, but
I think it was 2022 now.
Isn't though an entirely new idea, is it? Because Victoria and New South Wales have already moved to introduce their own EV taxes. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, look, Victoria introduced theirs.
All right, well, Giles, this isn't though an entirely new idea, is it? Because Victoria and New South Wales have already moved to introduce their own EV taxes. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, look, Victoria introduced theirs in, I think it was 2022 now. It didn't last very long because there was a high...
Entirely new idea, is it? Because Victoria and New South Wales have already moved to introduce their own EV taxes. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, look, Victoria introduced theirs in, I think it was 2022 now. It didn't last very long because there was a High Court challenge which ruled it unconstitutional. They ruled that they had no right to gather excise. That was a federal thing only.
A landmark decision by the High Court found the tax was unlawful, meaning for the past 2 years, the government's been collecting 2 cents for every kilometre travelled by low-emission cars without the authority to do so.
So the New South Wales one, we're not really too sure where that is at the moment. But really, those things were really just about revenue grabs from the states. They just saw the federal government getting $17 billion worth from the fuel excise. They saw these new EV things coming in and thought, oh, here's an opportunity for a revenue grab. And they pretty much admitted that behind the scenes. It was really just part of their ongoing negotiations. And there's a brawl every year or every second year about, who gets what share of GST and things like that. And they all want more revenue from the tax. And that was really about doing that. Because if you think about it, I mean, just having 6 states with different schemes and, people drive interstate, they might go around Australia. I mean, how do you work out a tax like that? And the Victorian thing, it was knocked on the head by the High Court, but it was also so clunky and it just drove everyone crazy. It was just a complete mess.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because how does it actually work? How much do EV drivers have to pay, and how does the government actually check up on that? It's somewhat complicated, I would think.
Yeah, so the system in Victoria was basically odometer readings, and you had to sort of get people to fill out a form or send in a photo of their odometer and do things like that. What's interesting is that in New Zealand, they've actually come up with their own. So they had a road user charge for electric vehicles, which they've had in place for about a year or so. They've now made the decision that that's not very fair. So they're going to go to this universal charge. So everyone's going to pay a charge based on their weight and the distance travel. And what they're thinking of doing or looking to do is having some sort of electronic system. Now, these are the sort of things that always were already used in heavy trucks, for instance, just for monitoring their travelling and their distance and their timing and things like that. So the idea is that they'd use something similar for cars and do it that way, because really otherwise it just becomes a nightmare just in administration. You probably lose as much on administration costs as you would actually be pulling in if you think about sort of everyone taking a photo of their odometer and sending it in, and that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, all right, but if you did that and you charged every road user, you'd get rid of the excise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what they're doing in New Zealand. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
No, you wouldn't double tax them.
Sure.
And then you can frame it in many different ways if you wanted to be really sophisticated about it. If you wanted to take in, okay, well, should people pay for the repair of the roads that they're using? Should people pay for the damage to the environment that they're causing? Should people, recompense, for the weight of the car or the distance travelled? There's all different ways of cutting this.
EVs are a lot heavier, aren't they? Because those really big batteries in them do make them a lot heavier than a normal petrol car. Or aren't they?
I don't think they actually are. I mean, look, comparison. If you're going to compare a Corolla with a similar size EV, then the EV is probably heavier. But if you think about the cars that people are buying now, particularly petrol and diesel cars, those really big SUVs, they're all heavier than most EVs. you could argue that those really heavy vehicles, those utes, particularly.
All right, EVs drivers pay for user roads. Well, is it EVs the battery, or how is the battery system? How do we get nuclear reactor without paying for electricity and charging your battery on electric cars?
When they're fully laden, are getting away with not paying their fair share as well. Everyone seems to be sort of picking on and demonising EVs for whatever reason. I think a lot of it's political, a lot of it's special interest groups. But there's a lot of exceptions, and there's a lot of different ways you can look at them.
Do you think there's a bit of a culture war going on here, Ben?
Goodness, yes, absolutely. Yes. Most of the legacy car makers, some of them making really nice electric vehicles, but geez, they're being dragged kicking and screaming into this transition, and they're highly profitable companies. They're making a lot of money selling petrol cars and diesel cars. They make good ones, but they need repairs. They make a lot of money out of repairs and the warranties and everything like that. So they'd rather not if they didn't have to.
All right, okay, well, Giles, let's look now then at what this likely road user charge will do to the EV market.
What the road user market will do to the EV markets now, because we're using the road and we are fixing that, driving the cars, using the petrol, costing a lot of money.
Do you think that this sort of charge might really turn people off?
Well, it could do, particularly if it's unfair and it's only applied to EVs, because basically people, as we mentioned at the start of this, EVs are probably more expensive than petrol and diesel cars, the equivalents. And so if you're going to buy one, you're thinking about in terms of, money and how much it costs you, you might be attracted to an EV because of the total cost of ownership. So it costs you more up front, but you spend less on electricity and insurance and maintenance and all those sort of things. And therefore, it works out even or even better for the EV over time. But if you've got this extra charge, and if you take the Victorian example, for instance, you're looking at about $450, $500 a year if you drive about 15,000 kilometres. If you drive twice that much, then it's twice that much again. So that could actually make the difference if people are just really careful about their budgets. And we're now getting into that market. You could argue that, the early adopter market, the people who would buy EVs anyway, no matter what they cost and how much they might save, they've kind of done that and they'll continue to do it anyway. But now we're trying to move into this, what's called like the early mass market. And they're the people who do count their dollars, don't have sort of, huge amounts of money they can just sort of throw around just because they think, let's go electric. They might like to go electric, but they're wondering whether they can afford it. And this could actually tip the balance in a lot of instances.
And as you say, we do tend to prefer the hybrids at the moment. You think this could really slow the take-up of EVs? So what does that mean for our apparent transition to electric vehicles, which, we're on the path to that. We're meant to be.
That's right, yeah. Well, look, we're going a bit slower than we thought at the moment. And I guess a lot of that's because, as you said, people do prefer hybrids at the moment. Now, I'm not too sure whether they're preferring hybrids for a good reason or because...
ABC Listen, podcasts, radio, news, music.
Whoa, it's a good thing. I think it's just a battery that needs to be charged. It goes certain kilometers and then you have to charge it for another 10 hours, 5 hours, 2 hours, whatever it is.
And more.
I was stressed.
A lot of weaponization of it. Not only were there a lot of nuclear missiles, and I think a lot of analysts have tended to sort of be a bit
The military, watch out, brown cow, wow, yow.
dismissive of China as a nuclear power. I mean, it's been a nuclear power for a long time, but it's sort of never sort of quite rated as having as many weapons as the US and Russia. So people...
On the name of God, whatever the words you're saying, God, question it, debate it.
Haven't been as focused on it. But it wasn't just the nuclear capacity, it was this diversity of missiles that could be fired from land, sea and air, a lot of technology which is drone related, and of course that's the new thing as we're seeing in Ukraine at such a sophisticated level, and of course a lot of unmanned or uncrewed vessels, both in the air, on the water and under the water. And this is, the really big development which people have been seeing coming along. But, to actually sort of see it there, I think was a big shock even for people who watch this closely.
And so really the parade, it did show, Laura, that China is catching up quite quickly with the US capabilities when it comes to military. It's not there yet, but it really is moving very quickly.
Well, I suppose it depends how you measure it, Sam. In some ways you can say it's still behind the US, but if we're talking about the most likely confrontation between these two superpowers in the short term, it's over Taiwan if the Americans decide to get engaged there. And it would suggest that China has massively superior power to the Americans in circumstances of a conflict over Taiwan. I mean, the Americans have to come all the way from America to fight the war over water. It's not quite so far for the Chinese to come. And I think without a doubt, it wasn't just a message of, look, we're here now. It was a message of, I hope you're looking at this, United States of America. What we're telling you is don't even think about it if we decide to take over Taiwan, because, we've got all of these resources and we'll essentially blast you out of the water before you even get here.
All right, so Laura, part of this build-up has a lot to do with Taiwan. It's also, as we said, about sending this message to America. Another way that message was sent, of course, was by the presence at this parade of the Russian and North Korean leaders.
One of today's striking images is President Xi Jinping with Russia's President Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un.
It was handshakes and laughs all around, wasn't it?
It was, and I think that's sort of another layer or level of this. There was a lot of commentary after the parade and after all the handshakes and backslapping and the presence of the North Koreans and the Russians there, along with others, that we were now seeing the new world order. Well, I think, yes, that's true, but it's not a question of a new world order that's just built around those particular countries. I think it's a new world order in the sense that we're seeing this splintering of this sort of unipolar, bipolar model that people have sort of described for the last 80 years, and we're seeing this sort of multipolar order. Now you've got China taking sort of number 2 place at the moment and rapidly becoming the number 1. But without a doubt, the North Koreans and the Russians are now much closer than they once were. North Korea's boosting Russia's war in Ukraine with weapons, and they both benefit from being seen to be in league with China, though I think you'd have to say all 3 countries have slightly different ambitions in life. And of course, Donald Trump mystifyingly has managed to completely alienate India, who decided that they might as well come along for the ride as well and just send a message.
Yeah, because in a sense, Trump is actually bringing these autocratic leaders closer together, isn't he? Partly through his trade sanctions.
Absolutely. India is the most spectacular example of it, but even countries in, Southeast Asia, some countries, in Central Europe, they're all being hurt by the Trump tariffs and by a lot of the language that we're seeing from Donald Trump. And, in Africa, the cuts in aid have sort of seen a lot of African countries further strengthen their ties, which were already strong with China. China's played a really big hand in Africa for some years, but, all of these actions only facilitate China developing a lot more alliances right around the globe.
Okay, well, Laura, let's have a look now at what Australia should take away from what the world learnt from watching that military parade in China. We have, of course, this major deal for nuclear-powered submarines as part of AUKUS. the US-UK military alliance. And the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, announced on the weekend a $25 billion investment into shipbuilding facilities in Western Australia.
It is an AUKUS facility. Now, ultimately, where the United States really will maintain their submarines is a matter for the US. But we absolutely anticipate that this will be a facility which is available for them. It's in the context...
But tell me, is that what we actually need, looking at what China has?
Well, I've got to say, it seemed to me and a lot of the analysts I spoke to who mostly are, not necessarily against nuclear submarines, but, have deep concerns about AUKUS as a strategic position. I mean, there are a few things that come out of this. Of course, there's the underlying erosion of confidence in the US as an ally under Donald Trump. The question of the strategic sense of AUKUS in the short term, that is, having nuclear-powered submarines that are sort of deployed for a forward defence strategy in the South China Sea, when, we might have 3 of these things on the water at some point, possibly in conjunction with whatever the Americans are doing against this massive arsenal of Chinese weapons. So it raises the question of, do we want to be getting involved in a fight in Taiwan, which has been a question which, a few years ago, I think Peter Dutton was still saying, of course, we'd go to war over Taiwan. There's now a concern that, the indications from the way Donald Trump's conducting all of his foreign policy around the world, that it's questionable whether he would be going to war over Taiwan. And if that's the case, that starts to erode the whole forward defence strategy in the short term. And then I think also it raises questions about, should we be spending so much of our defence budget at the detriment of things like more personnel and more missiles and things, investing so much in this one idea of nuclear-powered submarines, on the basis that they might actually turn up one day, when we may be much better off just focusing on defence of Australia issues, which of course was the dominant strategy sort of from the 1980s onwards.
And not to mention, Laura, that while we are ordering, I think, almost $2 billion worth of these unmanned ghost shark drones, a lot of what we're getting will be manned. And we can see from the Chinese parade that that might not be the way to go.
Well, that's certainly what everybody is thinking, that it's going to be unmanned, because apart from anything else, if you've got a manned surface vessel, you have to spend a lot of investment in those vessels being able to defend themselves and their crews, whereas unmanned vessels is a completely different question. And we saw a lot of unmanned surface vessels that look a bit like frigates and things in the Chinese parade. So it changes all of those military equations, I think. And once again, the speed with which this is happening, Hugh White, the long-time military defence analyst, was saying it's a bit like sort of investing in cavalry going into the Second World War. It's redundant. It's going to be completely left behind. And, while the rest of the world's moving to things like drones and unmanned technology, we're still galumphing around with this other stuff.
Okay, so Laura, where do you think that leaves us then? If we can't rely on the US under Donald Trump, of course, do we just need to have an entire rethink about the path that we're currently heading down? And do you think perhaps the government will do that?
Well, it looks to me like they probably have to have a rethink for, just given the speed with which our understanding of the US alliance is changing and the technology is changing. Will we have one? You just can't see where the push for change is actually going to come from, because we've had so many rethinks and reboots particularly on submarine strategy, and almost all of them have been a bit of a disaster. So it's hard to see how that will happen, what the catalyst will be. I suspect it'll be one of those things where something happens. It may be Taiwan and the fact that America doesn't go and therefore we don't go. And as a result, the sense of crisis in our region will be such that it really galvanises people into a completely different national strategic debate.
Laura Tingle is the ABC's Global Affairs editor. This episode was produced by Jessica Wukyanov and Sam Dunn. Audio production by Cinnamon Nippard. Our acting supervising producer is Sydney Pete. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.
Stop that. Go over here and have this one. How do you do that?
Carriage, given that the weather is so gloomy today for this. So we can see just the King in that carriage now from the angle that we're looking at. And I think what is key about this is that this is a procession, so that it gives us all the optics to be seen around the world. It shows that strength of the relationship. It shows...
This is, what's this one? This is the President Trump, First Lady. Welcome to Windsor Castle with royal procession. It's really sassy. Oh. Reacted to it
smoothly on the day, and choices can be made about whether or not they take an open top landau or a covered carriage. And this, of course, a covered carriage, given that the weather is so gloomy today for this. So we can see just the King in that carriage now from the angle that we're looking at. And I think what is key about this is that this is a procession, so that it gives us all the optics to be seen around the world. It shows that strength of the relationship. It shows the red carpet being rolled out for the president. But it's not a public carriage procession as we would normally expect to see, either through the streets of central London or through the streets of Windsor. And that is because they are so concerned about the security and the level of protest that might take place.
Now, again, your expertise absolutely phenomenal in this moment. We've got lots of information about what happens in the next 10 minutes or so as they make their way around the grounds. They'll go through, of course, the George VI gate. That'll be in a couple of moments, maybe even George IV. Well done, Paul. But what I also want people to do is to be able to hear a lot of the natural music. We know that part of these occasions is the firing of guns, the sounds of bands and the rest there. But of course, as the Royal Ensign is flying over, we'll just take some natural atmosphere for a couple of moments here as the President sits next to the King. What an incredible view. One that Donald Trump, of course, would be dreaming of having as part of returning to the presidency less than a year ago. Again, you can still hear helicopters in the background, but yeah, I can hear a bit of guards, and according to the rundown, as the First Lady is currently in the carriages again, her own carriage there with the Queen. We'll leave you with some of the natural sound coming to us live right now from Windsor Castle. of the United States, the national anthem of his country, as God Save the King now plays, as the President and King arrive at Windsor Castle. Live here on Sky News as we see the Prince and Princess of Wales among that procession of carriages. Sarah, talk us through what we are seeing at the moment as we're passing, of course, members of the Royal Navy and, of course, the arrival from where the helicopters are to where they will be inspecting the guards just a couple of moments away from here.
Yeah, we've seen that carriage procession set off through the walled garden and heading to the George IV gate, Paul. We've got the King and the President of the United States leading in the Irish state coach. You can see it there with that very ornate gold roof. Often would have been used for monarchs for the state opening of Parliament. It dates back to 1853, where it was exhibited at the Great Industrial Exhibition in Dublin. It's had significant modifications over the years. Behind that, the Scottish state coach is carrying the Queen and the First Lady. And then we have the semi-state landau with the Prince of Wales, the Princess of Wales, and the Ambassador of the United States of America, Warren Stevens, and his wife, Mrs. Stevens. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is following on in another ascot landau behind, and so on and so forth. So a really spectacular procession. You have 80 soldiers forming the Sovereign's Guard, escorting this carriage through Windsor to arrive at Windsor Castle itself from the walled garden where they had that first greeting and where we saw Marine One touch down. And when they arrive at the castle, outside the castle itself, there will be a guard of honour with the state colours of the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards and the Scots Guards, and the massed military bands as well there to greet them. The first time that 3 state colours will be exhibited together, the first time that 3 regiments will take part in this guard of honour. Upping the scale. Everything about today's state visit is bigger and better than before. And we know that that will appeal to President Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. As a couple of people have been saying in the UK media that I was monitoring before this program, of course, let's be honest, this is a man who, the president, enjoys all of the finery. Much more gold in the Oval Office than would otherwise be there, certainly the way that he's appointed Mar-a-Lago. But to be in these stagecoaches, to be seeing these grounds, and of course the history connected with all of it, it's something that Donald Trump as a person has openly talked about, that he likes this sort of imagery because, of course, it is a representative of the strength of the countries of which he is visiting. We saw when he was going through...
All right. We heard it. Seen it.
If you don't know your fasting time, you're not burning fat. Look at me before. I want to lose 44...
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
If anything, was the ambition for a new 2035 goal. But how much of the process is about the climate and how much is pure politics? Today, ABC TV's finance expert Alan Kohler on this week's dire climate risk assessment and what our new target will really achieve. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
More than 1.5 million people in Australia are at risk of rising sea levels by 2050, according to Australia's first National Climate Risk Assessment.
The grim document's been released days ahead of the federal government committing to its emissions target for 2035.
And it's warning we're going to be seeing more floods, cyclones, heat waves, droughts and bushfires in the years ahead.
Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen admits that it makes for pretty confronting reading.
One thing that is very clear from this climate assessment is that our whole country has a lot at stake.
The idea that you can just ignore climate change and pretend it goes away or say we'll do nothing until the 2040s and then we'll get around to it is just not on. And this report reinforces that.
Alan, the latest climate risk assessment for Australia, let's face it, it's pretty dire, isn't it? It's dreadful reading.
Yeah, it is, of course. The trouble is with it, in my view, is that you can't, it doesn't really say what the odds are of the various scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's providing the scenarios and saying how terrible it all might be, but it's not telling us how likely really it is. It's very difficult to figure it out. It's a very comprehensive report, and they divide it into various types of risks of the community, of financial and so on. And then they kind of say, well, there's moderate and high risk and severe and so on. But as you read it, you've got to go back to the sort of legend to find out what each means. And it doesn't really tell you what the likelihood is of these things. So they give 3 scenarios, 1.5 degrees of warming, 2 degrees and 3 degrees. And they say that we've got 1.2 degrees of warming now. And most of the scientists say that we're heading for 2 degrees, whatever happens, more or less.
Well, as you say, Alan, it was a comprehensive report, but what then, in your view, would have made it better, if you like?
I mean, I just think it'd be better if they said 30% chance of this and 50% chance of that and so on. Because then, then people could, sort of the government particularly, could kind of plan around that. The trouble is that the government is able now to say, well, it all looks, possibly terrible, but let's be optimistic and let's do what we can to prevent it.
I would say to people, let's be clear-eyed about the challenges. Let's be realistic about the threats, but also let's be optimistic about the future. Because if we take action, we can avoid the worst of the impacts.
And the trouble with that is that nothing Australia does can prevent it, of course. Now, a lot of people, climate deniers and so on, say, well, nothing Australia can do can prevent it, so therefore we shouldn't do anything. And, people like Andrew Hastie is sort of that kind of in that camp. And the trouble with that is it's like throwing a coffee cup out the car window as you're driving along, saying, well, it's only one cup, it's fine, but you're a litter bug, right? You can't do it. And so, even though Australia's got 1% of emissions, we've got to do our bit, of course.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Hastie. Of course, this is so political, isn't it? We've got Liberal and National MPs at the moment threatening to quit if the coalition doesn't dump plans for net zero.
If Susan Lee, though, supports net zero by 2050, where does that leave you?
That leaves me without a job. I've nailed my colours to the mast, Gary. Like, if I go out with a tide in 2.5 years, that's great.
A lot of this is about the politics of this.
Well, that's right, and that's the problem. It's become, the whole thing has become a matter of politics, which means that, if one side says something, then the other side has to disagree with it. And it all then becomes a matter of, well, politically, what can you get away with, you know? So the Prime Minister is going to announce the 2035 target this week, and it's not a matter of, you know, what's the right target. It's going to be a matter of what he can get away with without being, you know, pilloried by either side if he can, or at least if he's pilloried, at least it's by both sides and then he's okay. These targets, the 2035 targets, were agreed upon by everybody at the Paris conference in 2015. And they signed up for the Paris Agreement, and everyone agreed to every 5 years come up with new targets. And so we're doing ours this week.
Yeah. So just remind me, though, before we move on, Alan, what is our current target? That actually relates to 2030, doesn't it? And are we actually on track to meet it?
So the 2030 target is 43% reduction on 2005 levels. It was originally, back in when Paris was signed, the baseline was 1990. Australia changed that to 2005 because our emissions went up and peaked in 2005, and you get bigger reductions from 2005 than you do from 1990. So we changed to 2005, well, Kevin Rudd did actually, just to make it look better. And then a few other countries followed suit. But so there's a mixture of some countries used 2005 as their baseline, some used 1990. So it's absolutely all over the place. Anyway, we're saying by 2030, we'll reduce by 43% on 2005. And are we on track to that? I don't think so. I mean, you know, it's 5 years to go, and I did a little chart looking at the reductions and doing a linear extension of the current reduction rate. And I reckon by 2030, we'll be 36% below 2005 levels.
Okay, so we've got this target at the moment, which it looks like we won't meet. So, Alan, now let's have a look at what this new target might actually be. That's, as we said, going to be announced this week. There are a number of figures that are being suggested, I suppose you could say, to the government right now, aren't there?
Everyone's got an opinion about this, but the Climate Change Authority is the body that models it and provides advice to the government on this. They put out a consultation report in which they said that between 65 and 75% is doable. So everyone naturally, particularly all those in favour of net zero by 2050, everyone's jumped on the 75%, said, well, let's go for 75%. And the Business Council has put out a paper modelling various scenarios of 50%, 60 and 70%. So look, New Zealand's is 51%. Canada's is 55, I think. Norway's at 77%, but that's from 1990, not 2005. UK is also between 70 and 75%, but also from 1990.
America, of course, has completely wiped its hands of this, hasn't it? Of this whole process.
Yeah, they're out.
They're out.
They've given up entirely.
Okay, well, Alan, let's have a look then a bit more at these percentages, because you say if we set it at 75% below 2005 levels by 2030.
But it's you know, really worried about climate change and those who are not worried at all. And so he's got to try and strike a balance there.
I think I read, Alan, that if we went for, say, 65% by 2035, that would mean we would need to halve our current emissions. That's within 10 years. That's a big ask, isn't it?
It certainly is. I mean, you know, and we're doing the easy things now. I mean, everyone's putting solar panels on their roof, and a lot of people are buying a battery now to go with that, and a lot of people are buying electric cars. So there's lots of easy things, but the hard things are making cement, and at this stage nobody's really figured out how to do that without emissions, and shipping and aeroplanes. I mean, everyone's still flying all over the place and burning jet fuel, you know, like, so difficult things are not being done at all.
Give me your prediction then. What do you think the government will land at in terms of this figure?
I've absolutely no idea.
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, I can't. I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I personally, I think that the government should be focusing all of its attention on adapting to it to the actual climate change, which is now going to happen. Like with America out and China still building tons of coal-fired power stations, we're going to reach 2 degrees, right? So the government should say, okay, it's going to be 2 degrees. What does that mean? And they should start to get ready for it. And they're doing a lot in that respect. I mean, Chris Bowen put out a national adaptation report at the same time as the risk assessment. And it's kind of very worthy and full of words and, it's very long. But basically the issue is insurance. The problem is that insurance is going to become prohibitive. A lot of houses in Australia won't be able to be insured at all. And for a lot of other houses, possibly half the country, insurance is going to become really dear. And so, we've got to hear from the government, I think, as to what they're going to do about that. What's the plan? Are they going to become the insurer of last resort? Are they going to provide some sort of subsidy to help, as we do with Medicare? What's the plan? We had the first meeting, Kyoto Protocols, in 1997, and, emissions have done nothing but rise since then. So, it's definitely going to happen. So the only question is, how bad is it going to be? Is it going to be just terrible, or is it going to be catastrophic?
Alan Kohler is ABC TV's finance expert. This episode was produced by Jessica Wukyanov. Audio production by Cinnamon Nippard. Our acting supervising producer is Sydney Pete. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.
European Commission lays out new tariffs and sanctions on Israel over war in Gaza, ABC News. The European Commission has proposed new tariffs and sanctions to pressure Israel to end the war in Gaza. Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, urged the 27 member nations to increase tariffs on some Israeli goods and impose sanctions on 10 Hamas leaders and Israeli settlers. She also called for sanctions to be placed on Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. The sanctions would freeze any of the individual's European assets and ban travel within the EU. If enough EU nations agree, tariffs amounting to about €230 million, $407 million, will be slapped on the 37% of the €15.9 billion of Israeli goods imported to the EU, European Commissioner for Trade, Maros Sefcovic said. The Commission is proposing to revoke the zero tariff preference for a select amount of imported Israeli goods and instead fall back on world trade organization tariffs, which vary from 8% to 40% on individual goods. We're not proposing to suspend trade with Israel, we are proposing to suspend trade preferences, said a senior European official tasked with communicating for the European Commission but not authorized to be publicly named according to Commission policy. They said that Israeli arms exports to the EU will remain unaffected under the proposal, pressuring Israel to end the war. On Wednesday, the Hamas-run Gaza Health Authority announced the death toll in the Palestinian enclave had topped 65,000 people since the war began October 7, 2023, with a Hamas-led attack on Israel. We are proposing these measures not to punish Israel or Israel people, but to really try to pressure Israeli government to change course and to end the human suffering in Gaza, Ms. Kallas said. The war needs to end, the suffering must stop, and all hostages must be released, she said. The Commission also gives support to the Palestinian Authority. Israel denies there is starvation in Gaza and says it allows in enough humanitarian aid. The EU is Israel's largest trading partner, so the tariffs might have far-reaching effects on Israel's economy, which is already rattled by the cost of a long war. Roughly €32 million, $56.7 million, in bilateral funds controlled by the European Commission would be immediately suspended. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar sent a letter to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen vowing that Israel will buck the European campaign. Pressure through sanctions will not work. The State of Israel is a proud sovereign nation, and we will not be bent through threats while Israel's security is at stake, he wrote in the letter. EU members divided over Israel. The 27-nation EU bloc has been split over the war in the Gaza Strip. It is unclear whether a majority will agree to endorse the sanctions and trade measures. The bloodshed in Gaza has prompted protests in multiple European cities, from Amsterdam to Barcelona, and fueled criticism of Brussels' bureaucracy over its perceived inability to meaningfully pressure Israel to halt military operations and let in more humanitarian aid. The proposed partial suspension is a carefully considered response to an increasingly urgent situation, said Mr. Šefčovič, the European Commission trade representative. The proposal followed the announcement last week by Ms. von der Leyen that she will seek sanctions and a partial trade suspension against Israel over its military campaign in Gaza, breaking with her strong pro-Israel stance. Other European officials speaking on background said that Israel's military campaign in Gaza and also increasingly violent settlement activity in the West Bank, spearheaded by Mr. Ben-Gvir and Mr. Smotrich, had given new momentum to the sanctions. AP.
At Valia, we know a healthy gut means a happy you. So boost your gut health and immunity with Valia's deliciously creamy yogurt, made with billions of probiotics. Valia, get gut happy. Squeeze the day with our new Valia Boost yogurts.
Hungry Jack's is cooking up something new. Try the Kansas City range. The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
The Post came to hand out pensions. Around 40 people gathered here. A drone flew by and flew away. And then there was a hit. The Post's car was parked here. There were a lot of people here. They say 24 people died.
Now, Zelensky said Zelensky said that Russia had interpreted the lack of stronger international sanctions as permission to continue its war.
Hungry Jack's is cooking up something new. Try the Kansas City range. The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
Signed the birthday card. he didn't do this, he also didn't do the check. Those were in documents from the estate. So what is the working theory as to why he's in them?
The president has one of the most famous signatures in the world, and he has for many, many years. You know that, Maggie, you've covered him for a long time, long before he assumed this office when he was a businessman in New York. The president did not write that letter. He did not sign those documents. He maintains that position, and that position will be argued in court by his lawyers. The president is very confident he is going to win this case.
Carolina, thank you. Is the president planning to meet with Eric Adams in New York, maybe at the Yankees game? And has he personally talked to him about the race?
I am not tracking any meeting with Mayor Adams at this time, but if that happens, I'm sure the New York Post will be one of the first people to know about it. I'll take a couple more questions. Why don't we go to the back?
Tom Dempsey with News Nation. Regarding the growing U.S. military
News Nation, all the way in the back.
Regarding the U.S. military, the growing U.S. military presence in the Caribbean, when asked directly about possible future military action, President Trump responded, "You're going to find out." What could the U.S. public expect of that situation moving forward, and what sort of ongoing threat does Trendeo Agro?
I think it would be very unwise of me to preview what the president meant from this podium, but I think what the heart of what the president was saying, I know what the heart of what the president was saying in this administration believes, is that the regime in Venezuela is illegitimate, and it is unacceptable to this president and this administration to traffic illegal, deadly drugs into the United States of America. And that's why the president and the administration took very strong action against a boat and 11 narco-terrorists in international waters, as you all saw. I think that sends a very strong message to drug traffickers around the world. The president will not tolerate it, and the amount of drugs on that boat represents the lives of thousands of Americans that could have been killed by that deadly poison, and we're not going to allow that deadly poison to come into our country. The president will be signing a proclamation in the Oval Office later this afternoon, and we will see you all later. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll begin with a scheduling update today. President Trump will commemorate the 24th anniversary of 9/11 on Thursday with a visit to the Pentagon Memorial in the morning, followed by an appearance at the New York Yankees game at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx on Thursday evening. Next week, as you all know, the President and the First Lady will depart for their historic state visit to the United Kingdom on Tuesday, and they return to Washington on Thursday. Today, I would like to address the tragedy that has not received nearly enough media attention, the brutal murder of Irina Zarutska. Here are the facts that many outlets have shamefully and intentionally failed to report until President Trump drew attention to it. On August 22nd, Irina Zarutska was stabbed to death on the rail system in Charlotte, North Carolina, by a savage career criminal. This is a public transportation system that many in the area use every single day to go to school and work. Irina was on the train that night traveling home from her job at a pizzeria, still in uniform from her shift. This beautiful, innocent 23-year-old young woman was a Ukrainian refugee who had recently fled her country for a chance at a safer life and a promising new beginning here in the United States of America. But tragically, a public transportation system in a major American city was more dangerous than the active war zone that she left. The president and the entire White House are praying for her family and friends during this unimaginably difficult time. But while we extend our thoughts and prayers, we must also seek justice for this crime and call attention to this heinous incident. Surveillance video of the killing was finally released to the public this past Friday. It shows the alleged killer, DeCarlos Brown Jr., pull out a knife, get up from his seat behind Irina, and prepare to thrust a blade into her neck before the released footage gets cut. This is pure evil on full display. The most enraging and unacceptable part of this story is that her death was entirely preventable. DeCarlos Brown never should have been on that train that night. In fact, he should have been behind bars. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge, and he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023. Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge I will add, was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Arena should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities. And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer. Here's the truth that every American must know. Too many innocent people across the country continue to pay the price of the failed experiment known as cashless bail that has been championed by the Democrat Party for years. All the way back in 2020, North Carolina's then Democrat Governor Roy Cooper established a so-called task force for racial equity in criminal justice. Sounds nice, but it's not. That task force was co-authored by then Attorney General and current Democrat Governor Josh Stein. It recommended, quote, reimagining public safety to, quote, promote diversion and other alternatives to arrest. It also advised to de-emphasize some felony crimes,
Hungry Jack's is cooking up something new. Try the Kansas City range. The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
Donald Trump has touched down in the UK for an unprecedented visit. In just a few hours, the US president will meet with King Charles for a second state visit, where he'll be given the full...
Oh, you idiot. No, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. Go to the idiots. Go to the idiots.
For 2 hours today, much of the city's north was left powerless. 15 suburbs were suddenly cut off, and despite investigating for more than 8 hours, Ausgrid still doesn't know why.
The lights went out and police turned old school. hand signals, the only way to keep traffic in order. Pennant Hills Road and the Pacific Highway, one of the countless intersections impacted by a power outage in Sydney's north.
From Mount Colah down to Carlingford and west to Cherrybrook, all suburbs between there without power.
Traffic lights, train services and businesses. Just after 10 a.m, this was Westfield Hornsby, open but shoppers in the dark. Fire crews called to help people trapped in lifts. It amounted to a mass blackout. Power cut to almost 50,000 customers across more than a dozen suburbs.
So no lunch?
No more, everything gone.
And as shop owners began counting their losses, the lights came back on at around 12:15, just as customers were getting hungry.
Get your lunch, mate.
Yeah, getting my lunch now.
Happy
right
days.
on time, yeah.
Happy day. So what happened? Ausgrid says it doesn't know yet, and it will take some time to work it out. And in the statement, there's no mention of an apology.
With summer looming, hopefully it's not a bad omen for us all. Damien Ryan, 9 News.
And there is only one. I'm alive. Just kidding.
Donald Trump has touched down in the UK.
At Valia, we know a healthy gut means a happy you. So boost your gut health and immunity with Valia's deliciously creamy yogurt, made with billions of probiotics. Valia, get gut happy. Squeeze the day with our new Valia Boost yogurts.
New details of Brandon Smith's alleged illegal betting scandal have been revealed in court. Text messages between friends, one an accused drug dealer, appear to show Smith giving insider information, with potential winnings of more than $20,000 for his mates.
Coming back from a knee injury, it was the day Brandon Smith's career was revived in Rabbitohs colours.
Great to welcome back Brandon Smith from that ACL. First time we've seen him in the best part of a year.
In the 22 jersey, named in the extended squad, but what he knew and others did not was that he'd been told he was starting, and it's claimed two of his mates were also in the know.
Here's Smith. Takes them on. He nearly got through.
Queensland Police say 4 days earlier in a group chat, a friend messaged Smith. You playing this weekend? Yep. First grade? Yeah, bro. Told me today. Starting too. Then bets are placed. Let's go. Followed by a screenshot of a bet paying out $2,125 for Smith to score a try. $8.50, that's crazy. Can I get a confirmation you are run on? I'm run on 100%. Then a second bet is placed. The potential winnings more than $18,000, this time for Smith to be the first try scorer. To which Smith laughs.
It'd be no different from someone telling their father, mother, grandmother, best friend, their local baker or candlestick maker that they're playing on the weekend. What odds the betting company had is a matter for them.
Smith then suggests another friend backs him for first try scorer too. The police brief also alleges that friend B is the drug dealer whose number Smith provided to Victor Radley to buy cocaine on the Sunshine Coast. Bro, I'm paying $91 for first try scorer. The friend replies, back it. To which Smith says, I'm starting. I'll back it. So it's not a bad bet. Brah, ask to send you his bet. $8.50 any time and $91 sports bet. Friend B then replies, I just went on lads, got $51. Smith didn't score a try in the game and left the field injured in the 76th minute.
The matter will be before court tomorrow. Brandon will attend.
Due to his alleged involvement with a drug dealer, Radley's career at the Roosters could now be in jeopardy, with Chairman Nick Politis declaring a zero tolerance on illicit drugs. But he has not been charged with a crime, and there is no suggestion he has acted unlawfully in any way. It's understood the club...
SBS Audio is supported by advertising.
Uncover the stories that shaped our world with SBS Audio.
Australia Fair.
Hi everyone, welcome to the SBS on the Money podcast for this Tuesday, the 16th of September 2025. It's a day where the Australian share market rose 1/3% to 8,877, and when the Australian dollar reached a 10-month high of about 66.76 US cents. For more on that and what it means, I spoke with Chris Weston. He's the head of research at Pepperstone. Chris, firstly, US shares continue to rally. The Nasdaq at a record high overnight. The AI players in particular doing well. Alphabet, the owner of Google, now a $3 trillion company. But how much of it has to do with expectations the US will cut official interest rates there on Thursday morning?
Well, I think people have had expectations of rate cuts for some time. So it's not really much of a new phenomenon, really. I think there has been rotation within sectors, within the S&P and almost within the Nasdaq as well. People have been in value, people have been in financials, and they sort of rotate into the high growth, high quality end of town. But if you have a look at Alphabet, it's been in absolute beast mode for ages now. it's absolutely ripping, and momentum favours the brave, and you've got a stock that is benefiting from a change in the regulatory situation, but also their move into the AI scene as well. Their TPUs potentially cutting a bit of Nvidia's lunch. I think Tesla had a big move last night. Everyone got very excited about Elon Musk buying 2.5 million shares. I think you put it into context when the guy already owns 500 million shares. It's a bit of a blip in the ocean, but it's a bit of a stamp on his confidence in the business. And $1 billion is still a decent sum. But look, the market's been high on expectations for interest rates for some time. But I think right now, people want to be in they want a bit of growth, but I think they still want to be in the very high quality end of town. And I think there's a lot of momentum that's sort of driving these AI stocks at the moment.
When it comes to that interest rate decision by the Federal Reserve, what's the big question there? Is it about the outlook, or is it by how much it'll go by?
Well, I think there's a growing concern that the Fed are behind the curve now. We're talking about the households in America who are seeing jobs hard to get. Every single month you see that statistic going up. People's real incomes are falling, and I think there's a concern that if there will be a recession in the future, it's going to be a household consumer behavioural issue rather than what we're seeing in the business sector, which is actually flourishing quite well at the moment. So there is a view that, given what we've seen with payrolls, the revision is lower, the 3-month trend we're seeing, what we're seeing continued claims and various parts of the labour market, that the Fed could well be behind the curve, and that the consumer could start ramping up their savings rate, cutting back on the discretionary items, and we'll probably see some of the signs of that in tonight's retail sales print. But if that's the case, really what you're looking at now is, if you look at interest rate pricing, where the market's not just expecting a rate cut this coming September Fed meeting, but also in October, potentially in December, and maybe even another one in January. That is the sign that the market is saying that the Fed are behind the curve and they really need to catch up with this situation. So the Fed really need to express a certain urgency that if they cut 25 basis points, will they show the urgency to get the Fed funds rate down to more of a neutral setting around that 3%? If we don't see that urgency that meets that rates pricing, then you could see the dollar rally. You could see Treasury sell off a bit. Maybe gold comes under pressure. But I think there's every chance here that the Fed will show their hand, that they're in the mood for cutting rates further from September.
Can you go into a bit of detail about how the Australian dollar has been reacting to this? Because it's at a 10-month high against the greenback.
It is, yeah. It's looking really strong at the moment. Obviously that when you're looking at the US dollar, it's largely a US dollar play, and the US dollar has been weakening on a broad basis for those factors that I said, that people are seeing, the Fed not just starting an easing cycle when a lot of other central banks are closer towards the end, but there's a concern that the Fed could be behind the curve, and also that you've got Donald Trump trying to play an influence on the Federal Reserve itself, and that means you've got to wear a slightly higher premium for the US dollar. Now, I think Australia is actually looking quite good on a relative basis, so it's why the Australian dollar has not just been rallying against the US dollar, but also against the euro. We're trading at the highest levels against the Kiwi, since 2022. Sorry. So, the Aussie dollar has been performing very well on a broad basis as well. And I think that if you look at relative interest rates, relative growth, political stability with a fairly low deficit compared to a lot of other countries. And I say political stability relative to France, the US to an extent, and also Japan. I mean, we're looking like a beacon of stability, relatively speaking. So I think the Australian dollar has been performing quite well. And, iron ore's been quite strong recently. Chinese equity markets, have been absolutely ripping. So it's been a sort of Goldilocks scenario for Australian dollar outperformance. And, it's been a strong contender, not just against the US dollar, but on the crosses as well.
What about the narrowing interest rate differential between Australia and the US, especially if you're talking about now the potential for maybe a 50 basis point cut in the US, or at the very least some successive rate cuts? Because some experts in Australia, I've seen some commentary from economists suggesting that they can't necessarily discount the potential for the RBA to actually be done with cutting rates.
Yeah, and I think that's probably going to be decided when we get the Q3 CPI print, which comes out in late October. So, that could really dictate the situation, because Australia's growth rate at the moment, 1.8%, is pretty much where we call potential. So it's kind of the equilibrium level where if it goes up any further at a faster rate of change, then effectively that increases the chance of an inflation playing through. So we're seeing relative growth. Australia 1.8% compared to the rest of a lot of other G10 countries, looking in quite a good spot, and we expect that to accelerate into next year. So that CPI print could be very telling indeed. But I suspect at the moment, the consensus is that we'll see another rate cut from the RBA in the November meeting, 4th of November. And that could be the last one we see in the cycle. The market's pricing 2 in the entirety of the cycle, to the trough rate. But where it goes in the Fed, I think is a very different situation. So relative interest rates have been working in Australian dollars appreciation, whether you're looking at the Australia-US 2-year yield differential, or whether you're looking at actual sort of tradable derivative interest rates. You've seen that, the move in Australia, what's being priced into the rate cut expectations, moving up relative to what we've been seeing in the US, and that's put some tailwinds into the Australian dollar. So, I think it's interesting. I think there's definitely risks in terms of market pricing that the RBA deliver less cuts than what's being priced. And I think there's a real risk that the Fed deliver more cuts than what's being priced at the moment, which again gives you some probability that the Australian dollar could continue to appreciate against the US dollar.
But basically just answer the question I was going to follow up with, because you mentioned earlier that the Australian dollar is in a Goldilocks scenario, right? But you also acknowledge the potential for the US dollar to continue to climb if the Fed outlook is a bit softer. But what are you baking into your forecast? A stronger Australian dollar from here on?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get overly excited about about a ripping trend that takes us markedly above 70 cents anytime soon. The US dollar is still underowned. There's been quite a lot of short selling of the currency recently, and the interest rate curve in the US is still pretty rich in terms of expectations from that. But if you look at the risks to economics right now, I think the risks are very much skewed towards the downside in US economics, whereas I think they're skewed to the upside in Australia. I think China's probably going to add stimulus, which will increase their growth rate at a time when we're starting to see a bit of fragility. The expectations for a recession in the US are still, say, 30% or so, which I think could increase if the consumer feels the pinch and starts to stave off, and we start seeing businesses showing signs of retrenching. I think in that environment, you start looking at the flow-based effects in FX markets. So things like asset managers increasing their hedging ratios for US assets. And I think then, that would be a big negative again for the US dollar. So I think all the signs are right now that there are real risks that the US dollar could go down further and actually, go in a bear trend, which, depending on what happens with equity risk, and, if it was to see, that sort of concern permutate into equity markets falling, I mean, that would be a negative for the Australian dollar. But, if we were to see equity markets holding up and people getting really concerned about what was happening in the US economy, I think, that could be a very positive effect for the Australian dollar and see it trade, nicely above 70 cents going forward.
It's Chris Weston there from Pepperstone talking about the Australian dollar. And now on the Australian share market, which rose 0.3% on the S&P ASX 200 on 8,877. 8 of 11 sectors ended higher. The best performing includes energy, consumer discretionary materials. The worst performing sectors, healthcare and consumer staples. And of the best and worst performing stocks, Deep Yellow, one of the best, up by around 9%, followed by Boss Energy. The worst performing stocks include Babcoor, down 3%, and the worst performer, Super Retail Group, off by 4.3%. For more on all that, here's more with Chris Weston from Pepperstone. Super Retail sacking its CEO in light of new information about his relationship with the company's former HR boss. It follows a similar situation with the former boss of Nestle overseas. Then, of course, there's that infamous kiss cam moment at a Coldplay concert. The question is, are stakeholders becoming increasingly, I guess, attuned to the social and ethical responsibilities held by management?
Well, I think, let's put these two cases in context. I mean, it's not exactly like it happens all the time, and it's rife within the business community at the CEO level. These are very rare events, but obviously, when you do see a leader, departing under such strange circumstances, it does throw the idea of managing risk and understanding earnings and how the company direction is going to go a bit more problematic.
Can I cut it? Goes. Oh, what's it?
Can you tell me what this is, please?
This is a arpeggi, and I've been playing it for about 8 years. I played it. It's a string instrument, but it's sort of laid out where like a guitar would go this way, like that.
Right, yeah.
It's this upward like that, and you play it. It's what we call where you have like your. This is whole tones up.
So you're just pressing it, and the note is coming from the press as opposed to a pluck. Right. Beautiful.
Annie, let me go.
Oh my gosh. Stevie, I can't tell you how nervous I've been about this interview. You are soothing me right now.
Well, relax yourself.
I know, I need to relax.
Chill.
I know. We need to have a conversation.
Yeah. Conversation piece.
Well, let me ask you about playing these songs on this tour. I'm just interested in how it feels to be playing songs that are maybe kind of 50-odd years old now, and how your relationship with those songs changes over time in terms of performing them.
Songs are like children. They're with you forever. Songs are like, it's a statement from the spirit of you, the spirit in you. And so my thing with singing those songs is almost like me taking another breath on a new day.
When you write a song, what comes first? Is it the words, the melody?
Usually for me, I write the melody first. It's in my mind.
So the melody's in your mind?
Yeah. And then, along with the melody, along with that, you do hear the chords in your mind. But so in the case of Love's in Need, I had the chorus, kind of together.
Engagement to try and block Australian initiatives. Are external parties trying to sink this deal?
Well, according to Billy Joseph, PNG's defence minister, they are. He told the ABC just a few days ago that there were external players trying to block this, although he did not say whether he was referring to China, saying he didn't want to name any names. But as you say, James Marape is insistent that Beijing has had no role in this delay, and that whilst it is an important economic partner for PNG and one which deserves respect, that Beijing understands that when it comes to security, PNG has made a very clear choice.
ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music, and more.
In terms of these kind of assassinations and murders, there did seem to be a period of decline, tension, conflict, tumult, and tension in American politics. After the 60s, there was, at least in terms of these kind of assassinations and murders, there did seem to be a period of decline, tension, until really the last 15 years.
After the assassination, of course, of Martin Luther King, the candidate for presidency at the time was Robert F. Kennedy, and he spoke afterwards, didn't he, with really uniting words.
Yes.
He was trying to unite the nation.
What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
That was significant, even though he did, of course, go on to be assassinated himself.
And that was true, I think, of most political leaders. Certainly Lyndon Johnson, who became president, talked about this as hoping it was going to be a turning point from violence. But in general, what did happen then was a virtual unanimity. I don't want to exaggerate this, but there really wasn't much political finger pointing. It was not either side saying it's because of you, because you're conservative or liberal or radical or whatever. And that does seem to be different today, I think.
But as you note, after the turbulence of the 1960s, that all really settled down for quite a long time, until about the past 15 years. So what changed and when did it change?
It's hard to pick a point at which you begin, but this may seem like old history, but Gabby Giffords was a American United States Congresswoman who was gunned down in 2011 for her political views.
A congresswoman in the US fights for her life after being shot at a grocery store.
Gabrielle Giffords was holding a public meeting at a grocery store in Tucson in her home state of Arizona when a man emerged from the crowd and shot her in the head.
And since then, there seems to have been a slowly escalating and increasing number of such incidents.
The man who allegedly attacked the husband of US Speaker Nancy Pelosi was carrying zip ties at the time of the attack.
It's alleged Bolter shot and killed former House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband in their home.
Former US President Donald Trump has been shot on stage at a political rally in Pennsylvania.
It's obviously all keyed to the extraordinary, intense nature of tribal politics, in which the ideological lines are tightly drawn, in this case between the two major political parties. But also, it's the totally changed environment, social media and so on. Clearly, that's part of it. There is a space which is opened up in politics in which it's perfectly okay to engage not simply in a rather even fierce exchange of ideas, but also one that is much more personal and much more inclined to view individuals with whom you disagree as somehow un-American. They're not just someone who disagrees with you on politics, but they're a threat to American culture, American society, American politics. And that is something that is really grown in the last 15 years. And as I said, I think it's clearly related.
Yes, and we've seen that, of course, today
Yes.
in the case of Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
So let's turn to what has unfolded in America, Dan, since the assassination of Mr. Kirk. His wife, Erica, on the weekend, she took part in a live stream address. She said it was a battle cry for her husband's causes.
If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea. You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country.
It's a tragedy beyond words for her and, of course, their children. But what
Yes.
did you make of that.
That's one more example of what I was talking about, in which this tragedy is used as kind of one more weapon in the ideological struggle, the political struggle that's going on in the United States. And as long as it's just language, it's still within the boundaries of a democratic society. I think intensifying it can have pretty devastating consequences for American democracy. We shouldn't use this as an opportunity to glorify his ideas, which were, at least from my perspective, and I think from the majority of Americans, it's more than distasteful, it's hateful. I mean, his comments about African Americans, his comments about Jews, his comments about Muslims, his clearly contemptuous remarks about women. It is, of course, a strand of political thought in this country right now. But we should be fighting it, not embracing it, and not as seeing it for something that we need to be promoting at this time.
Well, Dan, the Trump administration certainly hasn't taken the opportunity to try and lower the temperature. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, he actually hosted Charlie Kirk's podcast in the wake of his death.
We have to talk about this incredibly destructive movement of left-wing extremism that has grown up over the last few years, and I believe is part of the reason why Charlie was killed by an assassin's bullet. We're going to talk about how to dismantle that.
And Donald Trump, he too was using really similar language, including on Fox News.
The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy.
He's very unlike Robert F. Kennedy in that sense, isn't he?
And he's very unlike the governor of Utah, who spoke very movingly afterwards.
To my young friends out there, you are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option.
Club is now exploring legal options if they decide to terminate his $700,000 contract, and have told his management Radley's free to look around. Michael Chapman.
Charlie Kirk shooting updates. Classes resume. Patel faces questions. Students are returning to class at Utah Valley University 1 week after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated on campus. As new information trickles out about the murder suspect and FBI Director Kash Patel faced more questions about the case on Capitol Hill. Kirk, a close ally of the Trump administration and co-founder of Turning Point USA, was fatally shot on Wednesday, Sept. 10, while speaking to a crowd of thousands at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. The campus was closed for several days before reopening to faculty, staff and students.
Oops. The sign up the day before, reporting to faculty, staff, and student phrase to week tragic death of Charlie Kirk on our campus on September the 10th has shaped our community.
Students in phases this week. The tragic death of Charlie Kirk on our campus on September 10th has shaken our community. We have witnessed a tragic event, but in the coming days, I am confident that our core value of exceptional care will see us through as we begin to move forward, said Astrid S. Tumanez, the president of Utah Valley University, in a statement. The suspect in the attack, Tyler Robinson, was arraigned on September 16 on 7 felony charges, including aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Local prosecutors have said they will seek the death penalty, a decision President Donald Trump has publicly supported. New details in the case were revealed in charging documents, including that Robinson's DNA was found on the trigger of the rifle police say was used in the attack, and that Robinson appeared to confess to multiple people after the killing, including his parents and his live-in partner. Meanwhile, Patel is set to appear before the House Judiciary Committee for a second day of testimony on Capitol Hill. On Sept. 16, he defended himself and his agency from criticism from Democratic lawmakers who seized on conflicting statements released in the immediate aftermath of Kirk's death. More, what we know about Tyler Robinson, new details revealed in Charlie Kirk murder. Patel says university rooftop was readily accessible. Rep. Scott Fitzgerald, a Republican from Wisconsin, asked Patel how the suspected shooter could have gotten to the roof of a Utah Valley University building to fire the fatal shot that killed 31-year-old Charlie Kirk. Not commenting on the case but having gone to the crime scene and walked the steps that we believe were taken. The roof was actually readily accessible through an exterior stairwell so anyone could have gotten on it, Patel said. Patel boasts of fast resolution to manhunt for Kirk shooter. At his House Judiciary Committee oversight hearing, FBI Director Kash Patel repeatedly sought to take credit for releasing photos of the suspected shooter that led to the arrest of 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. As a result, Patel told House Judiciary Committee lawmakers, the joint FBI local manhunt for the shooter took 33 hours. By comparison, Patel said, the Boston Marathon manhunt took 5 days and Luigi Mangione took 5 days, in reference to the deadly 2013 marathon bombing and the slaying of the United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson last December. Patel says FBI is working with Discord in Kirk investigation. Patel said the FBI is working with Discord, the gaming platform where Charlie Kirk's shooting suspect allegedly communicated. Discord, the platform, ownership, has been working with our lawful process, and we are obtaining materials from them on a rolling basis, Patel said. A day earlier, Patel told members of Congress that the FBI was investigating scores of people in an online group chat with the alleged gunman. Discord has confirmed the gunman had an account on the platform but said an internal investigation found no evidence that the suspect planned this incident on Discord or promoted violence on Discord. FBI director condemns political violence, on both sides. Under questioning from Representative Jerry Nadler, a Democrat from New York, FBI Director Kash Patel condemned political violence on both the left and the right. There is too much political violence based on ideologies from either side, Patel said. Nadler then asked if Patel had seen a Cato Institute study finding more political violence on the right than the left, and Patel said he was not familiar. The study, by the libertarian think tank Cato Institute, found that terrorists motivated by extreme slices of right-leaning ideology killed 6 times more people than those on the other side of the political spectrum between 1975 and Sept. 10, 2025. Since 1975, 391 murders were motivated by extreme ideology on the right, compared to 65 murders backed by extreme ideology on the left, according to the report. Aisha Bagchi and Aaron Mansfield. How Charlie Kirk inspired and enraged millions. Over a decade and a half, Kirk became one of the nation's most influential conservative activists, building a multi-million-dollar empire that he used to rally young voters across the country and help to re-elect President Donald Trump, whom he would count among his friends. Kirk inspired millions of people and infuriated millions of others with his hardline conservative views and often incendiary language on everything from abortion, race and gender to gay marriage and gun rights. It was a career that would make him an influential ally to the White House but would end with gunfire on a college campus. The very place he first found success mobilizing a legion of young conservatives. Read more here. Top committee members address Kirk shooting. At the start of the House Judiciary Committee hearing, Chairman Representative Jim Jordan, R. Ohio, offered his condolences to Kirk's friends and family. Charlie was a good man, a happy warrior who fought for principles and values I think make our country special, he said. Noting that Kirk was a strong proponent of defending the First Amendment. Ranking Member Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland, a Democrat, chimed in, calling the shooting brutal and saying, there is never any warrant for political violence in America. When will Patel testify before the House? The FBI director is set to field questions from House members beginning at 10 a.m. ET. During Patel's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday, Sept. 17. He said a group chat with a lot more than 20 people was being investigated in connection with Kirk's killing. The FBI director clashed with Democratic lawmakers, several of whom pressed him on his handling of the case. Democrats
How, who killed who, and where, who killed who's the killer?
Referred to a post on X in which Patel announced a subject was in custody hours after the shooting. Patel later said the person was released and a manhunt was ongoing. More, Kash Patel faces criticism from all sides for handling of Charlie Kirk and Patel. The FBI director clashed with Democratic lawmakers, several of whom pressed him on his handling of the case. Democrats referred to a post on X in which Patel announced a subject was in custody hours after the shooting. Patel later said the person was released and a manhunt was ongoing. More, Kash Patel faces criticism from all sides for handling of Charlie Kirk investigation. Utah Valley University resumes classes after Kirk shooting. A week after Kirk was fatally shot while speaking to a crowd at Utah Valley University, the institution is set to resume classes on Wednesday, Sept. 17. The university began a phased return of faculty and students this week, first reopening campus to employees before resuming student services on Tuesday, Sept. 16. This is a defining moment for us all. May we not let hatred overshadow the goodness of our UVU community and what we stand for, Utah Valley University. President Astrid S. Tumanez said in a statement, "As we come together and open our hearts to kindness and compassion, we will build an even stronger and more caring campus." Obama condemns Kirk killing, says tragedy being used to silence discussion. Former President Barack Obama called the killing of Kirk and other recent acts of political violence horrific during a speech Tuesday, Sept. 16, while criticizing President Donald Trump for using the tragedy to stifle debate critical to democracy. Obama, the two-term president who remains one of the most influential forces within the Democratic Party, said Americans should condemn political violence when it occurs but also be free to debate the ideas espoused by the victims of such violence. Speaking to a crowd of 8,000 people at the Erie Insurance Arena, Obama drew sharp differences with Trump throughout the evening, without ever saying the president's name. "I've noticed that there's been some confusion around this lately coming from the White House and some of the other positions of authority that suggest we're going to identify an enemy, we're going to suggest that somehow that enemy was at fault. And we are then going to use that as a rationale for trying to silence discussion around who we are as a country and what direction we should go. And that's a mistake," the former president said. Matthew Rink, USA Today Network. More, Obama condemns Charlie Kirk's killing, says tragedy being used to silence discussion. What we know about Tyler Robinson. According to court records, Robinson had been planning the attack for a week and used a weapon he described as Grandpa's rifle. Robinson, court records said, later messaged his roommate, with whom he was in a romantic relationship, after the fatal shooting. Those were among the details contained in a 10-page charging document released by Utah County Attorney Jeff Gray, who held a news conference after he charged Robinson, a former straight-A student from Utah, with aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering for instructing his roommate not to cooperate in Kirk's death. The charges include the allegation that Robinson targeted Kirk because of Robinson's belief or perception regarding Charlie Kirk's political expression. Robinson's mother told police that her son had begun to date his transgender roommate, court documents said. Read more here. Chris Kenning, Nick Penzenstadler, and Christopher Can. Could Charlie Kirk murder suspect face the firing squad if convicted? The decision of Utah officials to pursue the death penalty in their case against Robinson opens the door to another question, since Utah allows execution by firing squad or lethal injection, which of the two would likely be used in the event of a conviction and death sentence? While most executions in the U.S. are carried out by lethal injection, Robinson faces trial in Utah, which is only one of two death penalty states that have used the firing squad in modern U.S. history. Utah and South Carolina have executed just 5 inmates by firing squad since 1977, though 2 of those executions happened this year. Before 2025, only Utah had carried out firing squad executions, in 1977, 1996, and 2010. Utah was just days away from conducting a firing squad execution this month before the Utah Supreme Court intervened. The state was set to execute Ralph Menzies by firing squad on September 5 for the 1986 murder of a married mother of 3. Though Menzies chose the firing squad decades ago, the state's high court halted it over concerns about his current dementia and whether he still understands why he's being executed. Read more here. Amanda Lee Myers. Patel returns to Congress after clashing with Senate Dems over Kirk probe. FBI Director Kash Patel returns to Congress on Wednesday after facing tough questions from Senate Democrats over the agency's handling of major investigations, such as the assassination of Kirk, and at times got into shouting matches with them. Illinois Sen. Dick Durbin, the highest-ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, criticized Patel's tweet the night of Kirk's killing that inaccurately announced a subject was in custody in relation to the investigation. Mr. Patel was so anxious to take credit for finding Mr. Kirk's assassin that he violated one of the basics of effective law enforcement, at critical stages of an investigation. Shut up and let the professionals do their job, Durbin said. Patel later said under questioning from Sen. Peter Welch, a Democrat from Vermont, that he did not regret the post or see it as a mistake, maintaining that he put that information out as part of his commitment to working with the public. If you put out a statement that says, "We've got our man," and in fact it turns out that you didn't have your man, that's not a mistake, Welch later responded. Aaron Mansfield and Aisha Bagchi, USA Today. Contributing, Michael Collins, Trevor Hughes, Michael Loria and Lauren Villagran. ICE is holding more immigrants in solitary confinement. Immigration detention centers are holding more people in solitary confinement than previously understood, and the practice is growing. New data show thousands more immigrants were held in solitary confinement under the Biden administration than had been previously reported. and the use of so-called segregation tactics remains high under the Trump administration, despite the documented dangers to human health. The more data that is released, the worse we realize it is, said Dr. Catherine Peeler, medical advisor for Physicians for Human Rights, and assistant professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. The Trump administration has dramatically increased the use of ICE detention amid a nationwide immigration crackdown. There are now roughly 60,000 people in ICE detention on any given day, up from fewer than 40,000 people this time last year. The number of people placed in solitary has risen at the same time, but so too has their share of the overall detained population. According to the new report by the nonprofit Physicians for Human Rights and Harvard University researchers. Alarmingly, researchers say, the data show people who constitute vulnerable populations, which can include people with mental health conditions, medical illness, or who face risks in the general population, are now spending, on average, twice as much time in solitary confinement compared to others in solitary. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement didn't respond to an emailed request for comment. However, ICE historically has maintained that it doesn't use solitary confinement. The agency reports on a monthly basis a number of people held in segregation, but people segregated from the general population are in an isolated cell, locked in, with no control over their environment, which is the definition of solitary confinement, Peeler said. ICE defines vulnerable detainees as those who are pregnant, nursing, or elderly, those who have serious mental health conditions or medical illness, who are at risk of harm because of their identity, or those who are victims of sexual assault or abuse. Isolation can have serious health consequences. The average consecutive days of solitary confinement for people with vulnerabilities surged last year to more than 40 days, according to the report. From fewer than 20 days when ICE began reporting these placements in 2022. The average length of stay remained elevated in the first few months of the Trump administration, near 40 days. Human rights experts recognize 15 days as the threshold for when solitary confinement should be considered torture, according to the ACLU. The agency maintains that use of segregated housing is a serious step that requires careful consideration of alternatives, according to its own 2022 guidance, which added that administrative segregation due to a special vulnerability should be used only as a last resort. Decades of research have revealed the devastating effects of solitary confinement on the human mind and body. Prolonged isolation and detention can provoke psychological symptoms, from paranoia to PTSD and depression that can lead to suicide, Peeler said. From the standpoint of physical health, chronic conditions can get worse in solitary confinement, she said. It's bad all around, in all senses. Other researchers have found high rates of solitary confinement among detained immigrants. In 2021, researchers conducted a phone survey of 203 immigrants who were previously held in immigration detention. More than half reported suffering from depression or PTSD as a result, and 45% reported having experienced solitary confinement during their detention, according to a study published in 2025 in the Journal of Migration and Health. Increasing reliance on solitary confinement. The United States has the world's largest immigration detention system, and the Trump administration is expanding it further. With billions in new funding from Congress, the administration plans to add another 80,000 beds to the system, which would allow ICE to detain more than 140,000 people per day. We've heard from detainees about the conditions in detention deteriorating, said Eunice Hunhai Cho, senior counsel for Thiklu's National Prison Project. It's in the context of a situation where detention is rapidly expanding, and there is less oversight and less incentives for facilities to be as protective of people as possible. Solitary confinement is a barometer of stress in the detention system, she said. It's used for a lot of purposes when facilities are under stress, when officers are trying to control issues or problems, or to impose punitive order in a facility where other supports may be deteriorating. The use of solitary confinement began climbing before Trump took office, said Arevika Avedian, a co-author of the report and director of empirical research services at Harvard Law School. The data she and other researchers obtained through a FOIA request encapsulated a 14-month period between April 2024 and May 2025. Spanning the end of the Biden administration and beginning of the second Trump administration. More than 10,500 people spent time in solitary confinement at detention centers across the country in that time frame. The data reveal an increasing reliance on solitary confinement beginning in 2021, Avedian said, with 2024 setting a new record. New regulations in December 2024 required ICE to begin reporting every individual held in solitary, regardless of the duration or their vulnerability. The numbers immediately soared and were 80% higher, on average, than before the policy change. According to the report, suggesting that hundreds of thousands of instances of solitary confinement had previously gone uncounted, researchers found. We wanted to see how much are things getting worse or better, Avedian told USA Today. So far, we are seeing that things are getting worse. Lauren Villagran can be reached at lvillagran@usatoday.com.
Shit. So we know.
Shop 2025 Ryder Cup golf tickets and week passes. The 2025 Ryder Cup is September 23 to 28. Week-long, 3-day passes and individual day tickets are still available for purchase. Single-day tickets start at $123. After 2 long years of waiting, the 2025 Ryder Cup is set to be played next week as the United States looks to bring the trophy home after the European team won in Rome in 2023. This year, team captains Keegan Bradley and Luke Donald square off along with 12 of the best golfers from the US and Europe, including Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and so many more. As every golf fan knows, the tournament should have a raucous atmosphere as the tournament heads to Bethpage State Park in Farmingdale. NY, it's the best weekend in golf, plain and simple. You're not going to want to miss the opportunity to see the Ryder Cup in person. Shop 2025 Ryder Cup tickets. Regardless if you attend the Ryder Cup regularly or the...
Oh God, 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 God. Name of God, name of God. I'm intermixhector. Name of God.
This is a bucket list event. Now's your chance as both single-day tickets and multi-day tickets are still available. Don't miss out. NY, it's the best weekend in golf, plain and simple. You're not going to want to miss the opportunity to see the Ryder Cup in person. Shop 2025 Ryder Cup tickets. Regardless if you attend the Ryder Cup regularly or this is a bucket list event, now's your chance as both single-day tickets and multi-day tickets are still available. Don't miss out. Get weekly deals, trends and product recommendations from USA Today shopping delivered straight to your inbox. Horesho to buy tickets for the 2025 Ryder Cup. How to buy 2025 Ryder Cup tickets. There's a wide variety of ticket options available for the 2025 Ryder Cup. With the festivities technically beginning on Sept. 23, fans can watch both practice days September 23rd-25 along with all 3 days of tournament play September 26th-28 at the golf course. A weekly pass for all 6 days of the action is also available. A 3-day pass for the weekend Sept. 26 to 28 can be purchased as well. Shop 2025 Ryder Cup tickets. Ryder Cup schedule. Tuesday, September 23rd, practice round. Tickets start at $123. Wednesday, September 24th, practice round. Tickets start at $156. Thursday, September 25th, first round. Tickets start at $222. Friday, September 26th, second round. Tickets start at $1,233. Saturday, September 27th, third round. Tickets start at $1,159. Sunday, September 28th, fourth round. Tickets start at $856. 2025 Ryder Cup Weekly Pass, September 23 to 28. 2025 Ryder Cup Week Passes start at $5,728 for the International Pavilion ticket option. 2025 Ryder Cup 3-Day Pass, September 26 to 28. 2025 Ryder Cup Weekly Passes start at $5,054 for the Ryder Cup Plus option. Shop Ryder Cup Week Pass. Our team of savvy editors independently handpicks all recommendations. If you purchase through our links, the USA Today network may earn a commission. Prices were accurate at the time of publication but may change. Joe Manchin has a new book, with the same glaring problems. This cookie notice explains how NBC Universal and its affiliates NBC Universal, or we, along with our partners, including advertisers and vendors, use cookies and similar tracking technologies when you use our websites, applications, such as games, and other. You should read the privacy policy in this notice for a full picture of NBC Universal's use of your information. What are cookies and how are they used? Like many companies, we use cookies, small text files placed on your computer or device, and other tracking technologies on the services referred to together. From this point forward as cookies, unless otherwise stated, including HTTP cookies, HTML5 and Flash local storage Flash cookies, web beacons GIFs, embedded scripts, eTags cache browsers, and software development kits. First-party cookies are placed by
This instead of going to the news, it tells you that you're third party. It's no good, no, that's not a good, doesn't work on this browser like that.
We're still in the dark, a missing land defender and the deadly toll of land conflict on indigenous people, land writes The Guardian. One day last November, Julia Chuniel called for her dog, Cholito, and they set off into the woods around her home to search for lost livestock. The animals returned but Chuniel, who was 72 at the time, and Cholito did not. More than 100 people joined her family in a search lasting weeks in the steep, wet and densely overgrown terrain of Chile's ancient Valdivian forest. After a month, they even kept an eye on vultures for any grim signs. But they found no trace of Chuniel. Chuniel is one of 146 land and environmental defenders who were killed or disappeared around the world last year. According to a report by the campaign group Global Witness, about a third of those, like Chuniel, were from indigenous communities, a heavy toll for groups who collectively make up just 6% of the global population. Chuniel, a leader of Chile's indigenous Mapuche, was living on disputed land. 10 years ago she had moved on to Reserva Cora, a 900-hectare, 2,200-acre portion of the ancient Valdivian forest 500 miles south of Santiago, which her people claimed as an ancestral territory. She spent years campaigning to secure land rights over the site for her community. But the site's nominal owner, the descendant of settlers, refused to relinquish control. He wanted the site for logging. Chile is a major supplier of wood to the U.S., and he wanted Mapuche Chile, Google search. The Mapuche people are the largest indigenous group in Chile, inhabiting south-central Chile and southwestern Argentina. Known for their history of successfully resisting Inca and Spanish conquests, their culture, centered on the native tongue of Maputungan and traditional practices, faces ongoing conflict with the Chilean state over land rights and discrimination. Many Mapuche have migrated to cities for economic reasons, but they continue to strive for recognition and respect for their rights. Celebrating traditional festivals like Huitripantu, origin and identity. The Mapuche are an indigenous people whose name means, people of the land, in the Maputungan language. They have a shared language, religion, and social structure, though they are composed of various groups. Historical resistance. They are famous for successfully resisting both the Inca Empire and the Spanish conquistadors, fighting to preserve their territory. Population. The Mapuche are the most numerous indigenous group in Chile and a significant part of the country's population, with many also living in Argentina. Language. Their native language is Maputungan, although its use has declined, with many children no longer learning it. Religion and cosmology. Mapuche traditional beliefs include a three-tiered cosmology representing different forces. With the Wenu Mapu, upper realm associated with goodness and ancestral spirits, and Mapu, the earth being the site of good and evil struggles. Festivals. The Mapuche celebrate traditions like Huitripantu, their celebration of the winter solstice, which marks the beginning of a new cycle in nature. Land rights and conflict. The Mapuche continue to struggle with the Chilean state for ancestral land rights, facing a long history of mistreatment, discrimination, and dispossession. Socioeconomic issues. Many Mapuche people remain in poverty, and the Araucanía region, their historical homeland, is one of the poorest in Chile. Assimilation. Many Mapuche have moved from rural areas to cities like Santiago and Buenos Aires for work, a process of assimilation that affects their cultural traditions. Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Mapuche, Wikipedia. The Mapuche amputee, Mpuche, Mapuche in Spanish, Maput, also known as Araucanians, are a group of indigenous inhabitants of south-central Chile. Minority rights group. https://minorityrights.org. Mapuche in Chile, minority rights group. Araucanía remains the poorest region in Chile. Mapuche people remain among the poorest, least educated and most malnourished sector of Chilean society. Britannica. https://www.britannica.com. Mapuche people, population, language, Chile, culture, and facts. Mapuche, the most numerous group of indigenous peoples in South America. They numbered nearly 2 million in the 2010s. Most inhabit the Central Valley of Chile. Al Jazeera. https://www.aljazeera.com. The Mapuche and the Myth of Chile, Indigenous Rights, Al Jazeera. The 4th of June 2023, but at the dark heart of this refusal is a long-cultivated truth about the country's relationship with the Mapuche. Namely, Chile's problem with race. Chile's Mapuche Indigenous Group Fights for Rights, BBC. The 25th of November 2020, who are the Mapuche? Before the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, the Mapuche inhabited a vast swath of land in southern Chile. Renown. Cascada Travel. https://www.cascada.travel. Chilean culture. The Mapuche Huitripantu celebration. Between June 21st and 24, the southern hemisphere marks the winter solstice, a turning point with the longest night and shortest day of the year. From here on out, the Mapuche people struggle in Chile, land and territory. Britannica. https://www.britannica.com. Traditional life of Chile's Mapuche people explored. Chile, it's that narrow strip of land running down South America's southwest coast bordering the Pacific Ocean for more than 4,000 kilometers beyond the jagged rocky. CLE. YouTube Al Jazeera English. Chile's peace proposal. President aims to end conflicts with Mapuche. The 23rd of May 2025, members of an indigenous Mapuche confederation listen carefully as President Gabriel Boric delivers an address to the nation detailing a new Mapuche research starters, EBSCO. The Mapuche are the largest indigenous group in Chile, accounting for 75 to 85% of the nation's indigenous population. Many Mapuche also live in Southwest. Mapuche religion, Wikipedia. Cosmology. In Mapuche traditional belief, the cosmos consists of 3 vertical planes, each comprising a different force that remains in conflict with the off. Mapuche, Wikipedia. The Mapuche Mpuche, Mapuche in Spanish, Mapu, also known as Araucanians, are a group of indigenous inhabitants of south-central Chile. Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. Mapuche in Chile, minority rights group. Araucania remains the poorest region in Chile. Mapuche people remain among the poorest, least educated and most malnourished sector of Chilean society. Mapuche people, population, language, Chile, culture, and facts. Mapuche, the most numerous group of indigenous peoples in South America. They numbered nearly 2 million in the 2010s. Most inhabit the Central Valley of Chile. The Mapuche in the myth of Chile, indigenous rights, Al Jazeera. The 4th of June 2023, but at the dark heart of this refusal is a long-cultivated truth about the country's relationship with the Mapuche. Namely, Chile's problem with race. Chile's Mapuche indigenous group fights for rights, BBC. The 25th of November 2020, who are the Mapuche? Before the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, the Mapuche inhabited a vast swath of land in southern Chile. Renown. Chilean culture, the Mapuche Tripantu celebration. Between June 21st and 24, the southern hemisphere marks the winter solstice, a turning point with the longest night and shortest day of the year. From here on out, the Mapuche people's struggle in Chile, land and territory. Traditional life of Chile's Mapuche people explored. Chile, it's that narrow strip of land running down South America's southwest coast bordering the Pacific Ocean for more than 4,000 kilometers beyond the jagged rocky CLE. Chile's peace proposal. President aims to end conflicts with Mapuche. The 23rd of May 2025, members of an indigenous Mapuche confederation listen carefully as President Gabriel Boric delivers an address to the nation detailing a new YouTube. Al Jazeera English. Mapuche research starters, EBSCO. The Mapuche are the largest indigenous group in Chile, accounting for 75 to 85% of the nation's indigenous population. Many Mapuche also live in Southwest. Mapuche religion, Wikipedia. Cosmology. In Mapuche traditional belief, the cosmos consists of 3 vertical planes, each comprising a different force that remains in conflict with the off.
No. Chile, viva Chile. Okay, I'm going. See you later. Bye. Was anything? Okay, thank you. Intermixhector is subscribe.